Hi guys, welcome to this video. Today I'm going to be showing you how to paint this beach scene with acrylic paints. So this is a post on my blog. It has been for some years now and it's been a really popular one, so I thought this would be a great one to break down into a video for you so you can see step by step how I paint it. I think this is a really lovely one and I hope you love it too. So yeah, let's get into it. Okay, so before we get started with this tutorial, let's just have a quick chat about colour. So I've got two types of blue that I'm using in this beach scene, ultramarine and phthalo blue. Now the reason I'm using two blues is because ultramarine has a very slight red tint and a standard phthalo blue has a very slight green tint. And this makes phthalo blue perfect for the sea and ultramarine perfect for the sky. But if you only have, just say for instance you don't have specific types of blue, you just have maybe a blue craft paint and you want to try this tutorial, you could add a tiny bit of yellow or a little bit of green just to kind of make the blue slightly more greeny for the sea, and then that'll work really nicely. You absolutely don't have to have both, and you can see I've got quite large bottles or tubs of these colours because these are colours that I use a lot of anyway, so I'd have both of these because I use them both, but you absolutely don't have to do that. The other thing is, in my blog post of this this tutorial, I suggest using yellow ochre for the sand, but I also include a workaround for that in the blog post. So if you don't have yellow ochre, you can use just whatever yellow you have and add a little bit of tiny dot of red and a tiny dot of blue, and just to kind of knock down the brightness of the yellow and take it more towards the yellow ochre. And I'm going to be showing you how to do that in the tutorial because I opened my tube of yellow ochre and it was dried up at the top, so I thought I'd cut it open just to see, and it is completely dried up. So I also don't have any yellow ochre, so we'll be going through that workaround together in this video. As you can tell, I obviously do not use a lot of yellow ochre when I'm painting. And the only other colour we're going to be using today is just some white, and as you can see I've got a huge bowl of white because I use a lot of it, but yeah, so I'm using titanium white, and whatever white you've got is good. Okay, so let's get started. First things first, I've already done this step, but we need to put some masking tape across the page about a third of the way down, just to keep the horizon line nice and sharp. Try and get the masking tape parallel to the top of the page so that you've got a nice straight horizon line, otherwise it's going to look a bit strange if it's sort of slightly wonky. I've put my ultramarine blue and some of my white paint out, and I'm just going to get a bit of the blue, very strong, so I'm going to need a lot of white for this. So just going to mix some white and some blue together and get going on the sky. So I quite like leaving the sky a little bit streaky, so I don't worry too much about mixing the paint out really thoroughly. You can see it's, I don't know if you can see actually, you can see there it's kind of streaky on my brush. So basically we're going to start a bit darker at the top and just work our way down, picking up a little bit more white as you go down the page. So to start on the sand, I've popped some cadmium yellow medium hue and cadmium red hue, like a tiny dot of that out on my palette. Well, I say palette, it's a piece of scrap paper, but it's working as a palette today. So I've popped those out because we're going to need to, we don't want that bright yellow as it is onto the page. So we're gonna add a tiny bit of red and a tiny bit of blue to that. Since I've got the ultramarine blue out, I'm gonna use some of that. And when I say a tiny, I mean like a tiny dot. I'm literally picking up, I don't know if you can see, like it is the smallest amount because it can make such a difference. So I'm just going to mix it in, and you can already see it's knocking down that yellow and making it slightly green. So I'm just going to get a touch of the red and add that in. And the red and blue together obviously make purple, so adding yellow and purple together, or adding purple to yellow should I say, brings it down because they're complementary colours. So I've added a bit more blue, and there you can see it's starting to look more like that yellow ochre, which I've kind of got the remnants of here. So you can kind of see it's starting to get more like that, but we've got a little way to go yet. It needs a bit more blue and a bit more red. And then we'll mix it all up. It looks a bit of a grim colour while you're mixing it, but then you'll see it kind of comes together quite nicely. And it's very similar to this yellow ochre, or similar enough anyway for these purposes. So what we'll do is treat this like it's the yellow ochre that we kind of want to use for the sand, but we want to add take some of this out and add some white to it just to make it nice and pale, because we wouldn't want to use the yellow ochre straight from the tube anyway. We want to knock that down a bit too and just make it a bit paler for the sand. So just mixing a bit more white into that. Still a little bit yellow, I think, for me, so I'm just going to add a bit more in, a bit more red, tiny touch of blue. Perfect. So we're just going to brush that onto the page. Again, if the colour isn't mixed perfectly, really doesn't matter. In fact, that to me looks a tad bright, so I'm just going to add fair bit more white into that. Oh yeah, I like that better, that's better. So just brushing that on, doesn't matter, again, as with the sky, really doesn't matter if it's sort of streaky in any places, or, you know, fully, if the colour is not quite mixed or whatever. Add a bit more blue. It's all good. It just adds to the realistic effect, I think. And we just want to cover about sort of the bottom third of the page. And what we're actually going to do is bring the sea down over this, so you won't see all of this sand. It's still quite bright actually. I need quite a bit more white, I think, in there. And that's the beauty of this, is that you can kind of adjust it as you go, and I'm adding more blue as I go, just to sort of make the sand still, the sand still feels quite sort of a bright yellow to me, so I'm just adding a bit more blue to bring it down a bit, less bright, a bit more white. And that's the beauty of this, is that you can adjust it. If you look at it and think, whoa, that's too much, you can just adjust and go over it. The great thing about acrylics, it's permanent, but it can be painted over. Great. So at this stage we need to just let this dry, because the next part will be to start the sea, but we'll need to remove this masking tape for that. So leave that to dry, and then we'll come back to the next step. So I accidentally took the tape off camera. I forgot to put the camera back on, so I've peeled my tape. To be honest, it was probably just as well, because it actually tore the paper in a few places, so I was cursing when I did it, but it was my own fault. I should have, I know what masking tape can be like, so I should have heated it with the hairdryer before I peeled it off, just to kind of sort of, it loosens the tape. The heat loosens the sort of the tackiness of the tape. So you can reapply another piece of masking tape, so the other side of the horizon line now, if you like, just to keep it crisp when you paint up to this line when we start the sea. I'm not going to do that because I'm scared of what might happen to my sky if I do that, so I am going to just freehand it, and we will see how that goes, because I haven't got the steadiest hand, but it's fine. So I've put my phthalo blue out. I'll need some more white, and what we're going to do here is a similar concept to how we started with the sky, so a bit darker at the top and then graduate it, so add more white as we come further down. When we start the sea, we want it to be really dark on the horizon line, so I'm going to just brush off the paint from here. You can get a completely clean brush if you like, but I'm just going to sort of cheat slightly and use this brush. So we want mainly phthalo blue, to be honest, and a tiny touch of white at the horizon. Okay, so the anxiety of drawing a freehand horizon line has gone. Not too bad. I'm all right with that. So yeah, now we go as we go further down the page, we add a little bit more white and work as quickly as you can on this. Acrylic paint dries quickly, so you don't want to be trying to blend paint that's already started to dry, because that's just tough. So wet your brush if you think your paint is getting too dry. You don't want to add a lot of water, but you can definitely do that. And this is a moment where I would probably try and blend the paint out a bit more. I've said with the sky and the sand not to worry too much, but I think with the sea you kind of do need to get that sort of nice gradient where you can. So just keep going down, adding a bit more white each time. One thing I should have mentioned at the beginning is to keep your strokes horizontal as you're painting. So that just makes the blending easier. So the only thing left to do is to kind of just decide how you want to shape the sea as it comes forward over the sand. So I'm just going to bring it forward sort of a little bit in the middle. At this point I'm almost using pure white, but I've still got a bit of blue on my brush, so it kind of sort of blends in. And keep your strokes horizontal. And it's quite nice where you bring the sea down over the sand that you can see the sand through it, and that's really nice to give the feeling of shallow water over the sand. So now we want to go back to our sort of fake yellow ochre and add a bit of blue into that, because what we want to make is a kind of brown. I want it to be quite dark, so I'm going in with a fair bit of blue, because what this is going to achieve is to create the sort of shadow underneath the foam, to give the sea a bit of depth where it kind of breaks on the shoreline. So I added a bit more yellow and a bit more red just to make this kind of darkish brown colour. And now what we're going to do is, with the brush on its end, just sort of stipple it onto the, just to tap the brush down like this onto the edge of where you've kind of drawn, where your painted where your sea meets the shore. And honestly, you're going to question if this is the right thing to do, because it looks such a mess at this point. But trust me, it will all make sense in the end. If you'd applied some masking tape over the sky just to keep the horizon line crisp, you can remove that at this point. Just be super careful, take it easy, so as not to lift the paint off the sky. As I said before, if you can give it a quick blast with the hairdryer, perfect. Last thing we have to do now is just add some detail. So I'm going to take mostly white the tiniest bit of blue in here as well from where I've been mixing paint, just here next to it. So I'm just going to pick up the tiniest bit of blue just so it's not pure white. And then we're going to come and add some foam. So again here we want to add quite a lot of paint at this point, and let it go over the shadow. Because it's this foam that's causing this shadow. Just tap that along. Not worrying too much about how it looks at this point. You want to get it down first and then you can make any adjustments afterwards, but this is where the sea is rolling up onto the shore, and it's that extra kind of foamy bit where it breaks right at the very tip that we're just painting now. So keeping it quite sort of easy breezy at this point, because you want it to look like natural and organic, and that is how it would look. Obviously it's moving. Doing it this way as well creates some sort of texture in the paint that you're using as well, so that's great because that makes it look even more foamy. And if you have a little bit that's kind of gone astray, like it feels like that might have gone astray, well actually I think I quite like it because it looks a bit like a slight bit of sort of splash from the surf, so maybe I'm just going to add a little bit more up there as well. And yeah, just before you kind of panic about any kind of little accidents that you might have made, just think, oh actually, is there a way I can sort of like repurpose my accident or mistake and create something from it. The other thing we need to do now is just add a little bit of sort of white to kind of show where there's a bit of movement in the sea further back. So just keeping your brush horizontal, just make a few little sort of white or very pale blue marks just to kind of show a bit of movement here. Very light marks, don't go too crazy, and make sure you keep kind of like looking at how it how it's coming together, the big picture of how it's all looking together before you sort of add too much in. When you go further back towards where you've got the horizon line in, you want to make your lines smaller and smaller and smaller until they're just basically specks in the distance, just to show the depth of the sea that you've got going on here. And at this stage I would say, you know, less is more for sure, and you can always, you know, lengthen lines, but it's more hassle to cover things up. Well, all I can say is oops, I didn't realise the camera had stopped recording, so I merrily went on painting and missed the rest of this. I mean, to be fair, you didn't miss a lot. I just added a few more white marks towards the horizon line, as I said, making them smaller towards the horizon. Came back down here, added a few more longer ones down here, and then I went back over here with a bit more pure white paint, just sort of stippling that into the surf there. So yeah, that's it complete now. Like I said, there was a tiny bit there that you missed, but not an awful lot. I hope you managed to follow along with that tutorial fine, and I hope I broke it down into, you know, the steps clearly enough. And yeah, I'll see you again for the next one. Bye.